on, everybody? Manny here once again. Welcome to DFS Zone. Today I have a brand new video for you guys. I'm going to discuss with you what are the best possible plays for us here at DFS Zone in the receivers position for this week, week number 3 of the NFL. And before I get started with the video, guys, like always, I appreciate you guys smash that like button. Let's try to get 50 likes on this video. Would really truly appreciate it. And if you have not as of yet subscribed to the channel and you want to be able to get information every week on the NFL throughout the whole NFL season, as well as the NBA, which is fastly approaching us on a daily basis, you must subscribe down below and make sure you put on those post notifications. This way you do not miss any of my new uploads as well as any live shows. I do have one live show a week for the NFL, and we do those. I conduct those on Saturday nights at 7 p.m. So make sure you subscribe, come down, join the community. Let's discuss it. We'll discuss game stacks, team stacks, you name it, injury report. We'll go over the implied totals. We'll look for the best possible matchups. I will also look into what other plays we may have that it will be great opportunities for us this weekend during the course of the next few days, and I will discuss those opportunities as well on Saturday, and among other things. And of course, the most important thing is to be able to communicate with you guys, the viewers, and have the opportunity to be able to answer your questions as best as I possibly can. And also, we learn and we feed from one another, because a lot of people are relatively new, and that's what I like to do, is to try to help those that definitely want to help themselves. So come on down, make sure you subscribe. All right, I discussed a couple of days ago, 2 days ago, I pretty much started discussing what I was thinking as far as this week, as far as possible plays, and I felt that we could definitely pay up a little bit at quarterback this week. I normally not one, for those who follow me and have listened to my videos, I always discuss, and I normally don't pay up for quarterback, but I plan to do a couple of lineups this week where I do pay up for a couple of quarterbacks in the higher tier. I normally pay down at quarterback. I think this week I see, which I already shared with you on some of the videos, that there are some opportunities at running back at a little lower price, so we could probably pay down at running back and still be able to be successful. I think there's just a lot of great opportunity with the quarterbacks and receivers this week as far as matchups are concerned, where the receivers really, as of the last few weeks, have really been dominating as far as fantasy points, really tallying them on, especially with the receptions with PPR on DK. It's definitely been exploding, including those dual threat running backs, which I've discussed before and which I've discussed in my last video for you guys for this week's slate. So today I'm going to discuss the wide receivers, and I think there's a couple great receivers. Obviously, on top right away, I love Michael Thomas. I've been pretty much on Michael Thomas since the beginning of the year, and no different here. He's 9,000 here on FanDuel. He is 8,900 on DK, and let me just double check it. Yes, he is 8,900 on DK, and you know, he's just, man, I mean, last year, this guy last year, you know, they played against Atlanta last year. He did have one big game against Atlanta, which I really like. And I always like to look back to see how he's done against the opponent. I know that they normally play against this team twice a year, but last year he had one big game, 117 yards, and he put up 22.7 fantasy points in that game. But thus far this year, his numbers have been really spectacular. 2018, 93.3% catch percentage thus far in 2 games. I mean, he's been targeted a whole lot. 30 targets, 28 receptions, 269 yards, 3 touchdowns. He's averaging about 134.5 yards per game, and averaging 27.5 DK point, well, you know, fantasy FanDuel points, as you can see here. On DK, he's averaging 37, and that's a big jump. 10 more points, and that's due to the PPR because of all the targets and all the receptions. You get 1 point per reception on DK, and that could be very massive with receivers that are targeted a whole lot, like Michael Thomas. Last game out, he had 13 targets, 12 receptions, 89 yards, 2 touchdowns. He did fumble the ball. He's fumbled the ball twice, once in each game, but still 24.9 fantasy points in the last game. You know, and he put 31.9 on DK. As you can see, 31.9. So he is an excellent play here. Obviously, he's in the top tier, but like I said, I really don't mind paying up for receiver this week. I think he's in a favorable matchup here. In the red zone thus far this year, he's had an 85.7% catch percentage ratio there, and he has been really good in the red zone as far as the top receivers. He's been one of the ones that's been the most active there. They really have been targeting him a lot. 7 targets in 2 games, 6 receptions, 42 yards, 3 touchdowns. Inside the 10, 4 touches, 4 targets, 4 receptions, totally 100% obviously catch ratio. He's gotten 4 opportunities. He's caught all 4, 19 yards, 3 TDs. He's been spectacular. and that's all due to obviously Drew Brees making sure he is connecting with him. They're going up against Atlanta. Atlanta comes in, they're not too bad, 10th in passing defense after 2 games, giving up 219 yards per game, 3 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. Versus the receivers, 39 targets, 25 receptions against them, 266 yards and 3 touchdowns. But again, this was all against Philadelphia and Carolina. Last week, Carolina put up 272 yards on this defense of Atlanta's. Funches, 7 of 77. Wright, 5 of 62. McCaffrey, 14 receptions out of the backfield, 102 yards. These guys they tallied up 59 plus fantasy points on this team, on this defense last week. So I really love the whole idea of Kamara and Mr. Thomas really getting crazy here this coming Sunday versus the Atlanta Falcons. In the red zone, opponents have been scoring 80% of the time. So 80% of the time they've been in the red zone, the opponents, they have scored. They have allowed 4.5 attempts in the red zone per game, and the opponents have scored 3 touchdowns per game. That is just crazy. It's just they cannot win games against New Orleans. Now, granted, both teams are going to give up some points. New Orleans hasn't been that great either. But I love the matchup with Michael Thomas, Drew Brees, and Kamara going up against this team that's really been slumping defensively. And not only that, gave up a big game already to Cam Newton and company last week. So I love the chances there. So, definitely got to watch out for Thomas as well as Brees. I didn't mention Brees during the quarterback video, neither did I mention Kamara. I did mention Kamara as definitely a fine play. I wasn't on him because I wanted to give you guys opportunities as far as getting you a little bit less, coming down a little bit in the value as far as paying down a little bit at running back so that you can have the opportunities to take a more pricier quarterback like Brees and possibly his teammate Michael Thomas. But Mr. Thomas is my first guy, man. My next guy here in line, obviously Julio Jones. DeAndre Hopkins is my next guy that I'm definitely looking at against the New York Football Giants at home in Houston. This guy had 11 targets in both games. He has 22 targets already. He's 8,600, pretty pricey, but he's in a favorable matchup, and I think FanDuel knows that as well as DK. On DK, he's 8,300. He's right here, 8,300 for Mr. Hopkins. So far this year, 22 targets, only 63.6% complete catch percentage, but obviously, it's been a couple of drops and, of course, a couple of bad throws. But he's been targeted 22 times. He has 14 receptions, 188 yards, 13.4 yards per catch, which is pretty darn good, and 1 touchdown. Last week, he had 11 targets, like you can see here on the screen, 6 receptions, 110 yards, 1 touchdown, put up 20 fantasy points. Okay, he's pretty much averaging 15.6. In the red zone, not a lot of opportunities thus far this year, but now Deshaun Watson is starting to get cooking. He reached out to Hopkins 11 times last week. He finally got Fuller back in there. I think he targeted Fuller about 9 times. I can check that real quick. Fuller. Will Fuller the 5th, and he was targeted, yes, 9 times, I'm right, and 8 receptions. So, I mean, between those two, that's 20 targets last week. He's a heavily targeted guy. I looked in a little bit further. Obviously, I had to look at last year's stats a little bit, but he's heavily targeted on a regular basis. We know that. 11 plus targets 11 times last year, and already he's done it 11 per game thus far through 2 games this year. He's going up not against the best defense. The Giants have looked pretty good to start, but the Giants have not faced anybody as good as far as the threats, as far as the actual, most dangerous players here, where they're going to face now. They're going to deal with Hopkins, Fuller, and, of course, D. Watson. So it's not going to be, remember, the Giants come in here. Let me just go over it. The Giants, second in pass defense thus far after 2 games. But again, they've played only Jacksonville and Dallas. Neither one of those teams are teams that worry about as far as putting up large numbers. They don't have players that are big playmakers. You look at Jacksonville's receivers, you don't have that individual there. You look at the Dallas team, they definitely don't have, Dez Bryant. They don't have that electrifying, dangerous receiver. So this is the reasons why they are in second in passing at the moment. But the Giants defensively are not going to be able to shut down Hopkins and Fuller and D. Watson. I think this is going to be a great game. And I gave you D. Watson as one of my quarterbacks this week because of the favorable. I believe this is a favorable matchup. The Giants have not faced this kind of dual threats as far as a dual threat quarterback, and as well as playmaking receivers in Fuller and Mr. Hopkins. So it's going to be a tough matchup for them. So I think this is definitely a good play for us here as DFS players. They have given up the Giants, so just to talk about the Giants a little bit more, only 164 yards per game, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. They've only given up 40% on the scoring for the opponents scoring in the red zone. The opponents only been scoring 40% of the time. But again, that was between Jacksonville and Dallas as the first 2 opponents they're facing up. They're facing a very, very high-powered possible team here with these 3 individuals. And not only that is, they're also at home, so it's another drawback for the Giants. The Giants really need a win here because they're 0-2, and they can't go to 0-3 in the division they're in. And no different here for Houston. And then Houston has been doing this pretty much, not been playing that well, and they haven't really gotten the good defense, especially up front from Clowney and as well as J.J. Watt, and that's just a matter of time. I think Houston is going to be just fine in this particular matchup. So again, guys, I love DeAndre Hopkins here against the New York Football Giants. Then we can move on. My next guy in line, now I'm going to touch on a couple other plays that I am targeting as well, but I'm going to give you the best 3. This week I have 3 that I really like the most, and my third guy that I really like this week in his matchup, and I already skipped him, is Adam Thielen. Minnesota going up against Buffalo, and I really like Mr. Thielen here, as well as Diggs. Diggs is the deep ball threat guy. This guy's the slot guy. I mean, but he's so good, especially between the lines, in the zones. He is fantastic. Adam Thielen, he could definitely go deep and be able to get himself open as well. But 8,200 here, 7,800 on DK, as you can see. So a discount of only about 400. Thus far this year, 25 targets, 18 receptions, 233 yards, 12.9 yards per catch, nearly 13, pretty much round that off to 13 yards per catch. He has 1 touchdown, averaging 116.5 yards per game. He's been absolutely wonderful. Last week against Green Bay, 13 targets, 12 receptions, 131 yards, 1 touchdown, 25.1 FanDuel points, and he averaged 34.1 on DK. Again, when you get this many receptions, 1 point per reception in DK, it's a fantastic play. Definitely the DK. He is definitely someone who will be perfect with that PPR. He's averaging 19 fantasy points per game and 26.9 over the well, let's put it this way. Last year, 7 times he put up at least 14 plus. He also had 4 times last year he put up 20 plus. So he has 20-point upside. So that's what I really like the most. He has 20-point upside. Right now at the moment he's averaging 19 and 26 on DK respectively. He's a heavily targeted guy. He was targeted more than 8 times per game last year. He did it 13 out of the 16 games. So we know he's going to get targeted. Granted, last year was Case Keenum. This year he has actually, I would say, a better quarterback in Kirk Cousins. So it's just a matter of time before he's really just all dialed in with Kirk Cousins, and they basically are hitting him, 8, 9, 10 times a game and targeting him about 13 or 14 times a game. And this may be a game that he might be able to do that against Buffalo. All right, Buffalo comes in 16th in pass defense after 2 games, giving up 246 yards per game. But the big number here is they've given up 6 touchdowns to receivers. 6 touchdowns. Again, the receivers, 37 targets, 28 receptions against this defense, 316 yards and 6 TDs. They're averaging 52 opponents, wide receivers, are averaging 52.3 DK points and 45.3 FanDuel points per game over the first 2 games. It's crazy. In the red zone, opponents are scoring 90% of the time on the Bills. 90% of the times. Opponent 5 times per game in the red zone, 4.5 times. They've scored a touchdown 4 times and a field goal in those 5 opportunities in the red zone thus far this year per the 2 games. That is crazy. Opponents 64 plays per game is another thing that I like. 64 plays per game, and Minnesota is averaging nearly 70 plays per game. So it comes to show you a couple more plays. If they are to exceed and get 69 or 70 and control the time of possession in this game, they'll find themselves with more opportunities. More opportunities is more obvious receptions as far as PPR, and more PPR points is more fantasy points. And then the only thing they have to do is turn some of these into some touchdowns. And this is going to be really, really ugly very early on. But I don't think Buffalo has a chance here with Thielen and Diggs. I think you can go with either one of the two receivers. But I like Adam Thielen a little bit better in this matchup this week. So I would say definitely pencil in Mr. Adam Thielen. A couple of worthy mentions here. I definitely think, let me just go to the screen. Definitely there's some guys like Julio Jones, definitely someone to consider here. I mean, going up against New Orleans. New Orleans has given up 31 receptions to receivers thus far this year, 5 touchdowns, and 61.8 DK points. The only reason I did not point out Julio Jones is just because Mr. Thomas has been getting a lot more targets than Julio Jones as far as the connection between him and his quarterback. And Matt Ryan and Julio Jones have not been at that same level as Drew Brees and Michael Thomas. So I like the way Michael Thomas and Drew Brees are flowing right now. So I am leaning towards Thomas. But Julio Jones is definitely, and he's also a big playmaker. He could definitely break one for a big play and get a big touchdown here. So he's definitely someone that you guys should have on your radar. Other matchups, T.Y. Hilton against Philadelphia. Philadelphia, another team, giving up 52.2 DraftKings and 40.2 FanDuel points to receivers thus far this year, allowing 463 yards and 3 touchdowns. Could be a possibility as well. Obviously, Tyreek Hill going up against the 49ers. Definitely the same thing, 47.6 and 37.6 respectively as far as FanDuel points. Giving up 3 touchdowns on 415 yards and 28 receptions. I also like, I mentioned to you, I was interested in Mitchell Trubisky this week. Obviously, you got to pair him up with his receiver. His top receiver is Allen Robinson. So Allen Robinson, for me, is someone I'm considering. 368 yards versus Arizona this year. Arizona's given up 368 yards, 2 receivers, 27 receptions. Not giving up a touchdown, surprisingly, but 33.4 DK points and 25.2 FanDuel points is still higher. It's pretty high for receivers, not a little bit more than average from last season, but not too bad. And then, of course, Diggs and Thielen, and, of course, Hopkins and Fuller are definitely guys you consider. Michael Thomas, as I already mentioned, is one of my top 3, with Mr. Kamara in the backfield for New Orleans would be individuals you should look at. Maybe even Keelan Cole versus Tennessee. Tennessee has given up 59.8 DK points to wide receivers thus far this year and 47.1 FanDuel points respectively. 4 touchdowns, 469 yards on 33 receptions out of 45 targets. So Tennessee has had their issues as well. So maybe now that we're starting to see Blake Bortles is having a little bit of a connection with Mr. Cole, definitely someone you should consider, even as far as, you know, being a cheap play, because Cole is, he's probably up in the 6,000 now. Another guy you can consider that I did not mention is Nelson Aguilar. Carson Wentz is back, and he's going to need to continue to hit his main target. Is going to be him and Ertz. So definitely be on the lookout for those 2 guys. The tight end, the defensive video will be up next, so you'll get that very soon. But again, that's pretty much what I have for you guys, man. I hope you guys like. Definitely a lot of luck this weekend. Remember, we're going to have the live show on Saturday. I will touch upon some of these plays here in the receiver position, as well as some of the ones that I mentioned as worthy mentions. There may be some better possible plays. We got practices today and tomorrow and possibly Friday. So by Friday going into Saturday, we'll have a better gauge of where everybody's at. If there's any change in some of these decisions, in some of these picks that I've made, some of these selections, I will definitely discuss those as well on Saturday. So again, if you have not subscribed, please subscribe down below. Make sure you put on your post notifications, and of course, you will be able to join us on Saturday night, 7 p.m. right here at DFS Zone, so we can discuss the actual slate a little bit further. From here to then, I'll see you guys on the next video, man. Everybody have a great day. God bless.